listen that I love you? Tell me, do you love me too? I'm confessing that I need you.
An interesting fact about the word demon, which we in the Western world, and particularly nowadays, we look at as like a negative connotation. The word demon actually comes from the Greek daemon, which back in the days of the Greeks, daemon was a person's positive inner spirit friend, essentially. So if we look at it through this kind of lens, the idea of working with our demons is looking at the issues that they present to us, and instead of working against them, make friends with them is for a positive light. The same way you were saying is about work with them. Yeah, make friends with your demons. They're not that scary.
Welcome everybody to another installment episode of the Vibe Union podcast. It's Dilly D here hanging out for a golden time, joined by wondrous co-host Minti D and honorable guests Gio and Sasha from the Candle Melbourne podcast. Thank you so much today for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Just before we get things rolling and rumbling, Minti, if you'd like to take away with the acknowledgement, that'd be great. Thank you.
Wonderful. So first of all, I would like to do an acknowledgement to country. With all of you here today and all of you watching, I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And just to remember that we are on stolen land and we're very lucky to be here, but it's so important for us to remember, you know, who was here before us, and the importance of the land and the importance of the land to those communities. So without further ado, thank you to everybody, and may we continue to show our respect and gratitude to our First Nations people.
Well said. Brilliant. So, firstly, happy birthday, Gio, for yesterday. Please tell us about what you guys got up to and how the vibes were.
Well, unfortunately, I am now resigned to the fact that I can't stop the aging process. It's going to happen. But
That's right. Well, I thought you were already part of a vampire coven. I didn't think that was a problem for you. So
we have been for a while.
What do you mean you thought we were? Wasn't it obvious?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
It was. I didn't say anything, you know. Never good to
assume. In the
assume.
background. It's so beautiful. But yeah, tell us what you got up to yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
I said, tell us what you got up to yesterday.
So yesterday we had McDonald's in bed. We watched The Little Rascals, the classic version, which is fantastic. If you rewatch it again as an adult, it's really weird. It's just a weird thing. Then we went to the park, listened to some tunes, a lot of jazz, which is what we usually do anyway. A lot of Fred Astaire.
Hey.
We got
just the high life, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then we came back, we listened to more jazz, Nat King Cole, had burritos,
drank whiskey,
drank a lot of whiskey, took a whiskey nap.
Oof. And
then we watched Matilda, as in like the
classic, powerful magical movie.
Lovely.
It was a good day. It was a really good day.
Nice, yeah.
Sounds like
Wonderful.
A return to the childhood. Aside from the whiskey, I guess.
Yes, it was probably milk back in the day. I've got a question for the two of you. I would love, and I'm sure those of you out there listening and watching would like to know as well, how did you meet?
Oh, look at this. This is so beautiful. Sasha moves in.
Together.
Yeah. Should I just put it out there?
Oh, yeah.
Tinder.
Yes.
Yes. Wonderful.
The human catalog.
I ordered her from the human catalog.
Yeah. Well, the techno gods and goddesses delivered, didn't they?
They did.
Absolutely. And you know what stood out to me about Sasha's profile is like he had all of his acting headshots, so I could see his range. Like it was all there.
That's brilliant.
He wasn't sure who she was actually meeting.
Cool.
Like we've been together ever since. So
almost 10 months.
Yeah. So not too long, but yeah, it's been good.
That's beautiful.
Lovely.
I met a previous lover of mine on Tinder, and I can definitely vouch for the power of the app and what it can create with the right
Yeah.
intent. Though you got to be looking for the right thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
you want
Someone who's got a kid now, right? And got married.
to manifest it.
Oh, so like I originally signed up for Tinder because I wasn't really sure, how does one meet people during a pandemic? How
Mhm.
do you do this? How do you engage with people?
Mhm.
And so I spoke with a friend of mine, and she's like, you have to make a list and you have to put it out there, a list of qualities that you want in a partner.
Mhm.
And I had on there an impossible list, and it was poet, artist, magician.
Wow.
Yeah, most randomest of things.
Vampire.
Someone that collects, little skull figurines, the most random of things. And I didn't think
Oh.
I'd meet anyone. Yes, I didn't think I'd meet
Put that on
anyone.
your profile?
Sorry?
Did you put that on your profile? Someone who collects
No.
skull figurines.
It
No,
was
no.
just like a side list that I made, like a little, this is what I'm looking for in a partner. I'm going to keep it in my head.
Mm.
And then I ended up discovering this person that fit all of those qualities, including musician. So
Yeah.
It's it really begs the question, like, where does the true magic lie? Is it in the black mirror in our pockets, or is it in the real world? It's pretty wild.
oh,
I'd love
beautifully said.
I'd love to know how you two started your podcast, the Candle Melbourne. Yeah, please tell us about
Oh.
it.
So during many discussions that I would have with Gio over many a whiskey,
Mhm.
we would always be talking about, because I actually don't have any background in psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, but I've always found it interesting. So I'd always pick her brain about psychotherapy, and she'd always pick my brain about art. And we would talk about how like certain things impact artists over the years, and how it's like, different things that affect the mental state of artists. And we just sort of kept riffing on this. And then we actually decided that we should start doing this podcast. Just like, this would be an interesting project to do. Get artists together, talk about this, and actually have a psychoanalyst and an artist sort of being involved, because you have both sides of the coin there talking about the thing. People
Mm.
who know what they're talking about, as opposed to investigative, reporting in terms of it, coming
Right.
from an insider perspective.
Mm.
And yeah, we just discussed it. We put together a proof of concept, and then we got a grant from the Moonee Valley Council to do the podcast.
How did
Oh,
you-
that's fantastic.
How did you come across that grant? How did you come across that?
What's your
Oh, it's
secret?
Google.
Oh,
So
right.
we typed up community grants because we were looking for any grant we can get, and a lot of
Mhm.
amazing grants we weren't eligible for because we didn't live in the district, for example. But the Moonee Valley Council had a fantastic one.
Because they were opening up a brand new podcasting studio, and they wanted people to come and
Right.
use it.
So you've been able to use that podcast studio or not yet?
We've been in there once to play with the equipment to get used to it, but then
Yeah.
lockdown happened. Yeah. So the first and second episodes that we've done to the podcast for the Candle were recorded via Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's great that you have that access to it, though. So once things start opening up, you'll be able to, get in there and play around with the equipment again. That's fantastic. What a wonderful opportunity. Good on you for just getting that ball rolling.
Thank
Mm.
you.
Dilly, I'm just going to very quickly jump in. Just I want to know a little bit more about the reasoning. So you've explained that you wanted to have the two sides of the coin, the psychoanalyst and psychotherapist, but also the artist. What is your experience, both of you, just briefly, with mental health, which has spurred you to create this podcast?
Sure.
Awesome.
Well, I'm happy.
This is your arena.
This is my love and my passion.
Mm.
So I started off doing my bachelor's in sociology. Love to study people, love to look at communities, love to engage with people. Grew up in the West. I'm very much wanting to explore the community structure and how people engage with each other. When I finished that degree, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I thought, I want to work with people. I want to have a close relationship with community members, and I also want to help people help themselves. Nothing was fair into mind. Counseling came up. And so the more I explored that, the more I explored psychotherapy, the more I fell in love with it. So it seemed very natural to know that that was going to be something I would always embed into my career. So I love working with people. I love working with mental health, which is a strange thing to say. I love working with mental health, but I do love working with mental health. I love seeing the and sorry.
Oh, I did one of these. I did is what I did.
Yeah, so I love working with mental health, and it seems like something that we need to bring more into the conversation. We have a lot of talk about, are you okay, Dave? But then what happens next? What is going to realistically happen when somebody says, well, no, I'm not okay, and I don't want help at the moment? So I'm more passionate about looking at the help-seeking side of things as well. And in talking with Sasha and talking with his artist friends, learning about how mental health is displayed in that industry, how there's emotional instability in that industry, because sometimes people are not always financially stable, which we know does affect our hierarchical needs. And then that impacts our mental health. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to incorporate a psychotherapist lens onto the candle.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's my side of being passionate of mental health, and my intention for the podcast is to wanting to also bring a voice and artist voices into a platform where everyone else can hear and learn from.
And it's also one of those things with the candle. I think it's important that because we have such an open conversation with these artists, is to try and find what are, I guess, patterns of instability that they're facing that we can bring to light to maybe enact some change in a grander social scheme. Like, for example, artists are expected to suffer for their work as part of the social narrative, which I think is complete and utter bullshit. There's no real support in terms of free mental health or like support for artists, specifically financial or otherwise, that we can really call onto as like a specific bedrock for this. Even though we do so much for society, we produce the TV shows and the music that you all like to indulge in, and that gives meaning and color to your life. But as soon as we're done with our role there, you sort of cast us off and don't really care for that. But what about the artists who are still struggling? What about artists who can't get a platform or can't have access to things that'll make them feel more comfortable in their own skin and also in their own industry? We want to raise awareness of these issues and to try and get a lot of new social changes being enacted towards having a healthier, more effective artistic community within Greater Melbourne.
So it's kind of like a process of investigation, but also a tool for other people to kind of call upon and reflect on for themselves.
Yeah.
Powerful. I like that. So,
and so pertinent now as well, incredibly pertinent, given the situation that this entire planet is in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, tough time.
Yeah. Curious, what podcasts? I'm taking you both as podcast enthusiasts. Would that be a correct assumption?
I am.
Sasha is. The podcast I like a lot of horror story narrations.
Horror story narrations?
Oh, yes.
I love listening to horror stories. I've worked in some pretty intense mental health fields, and at the end of the day, for some reason, I just found the best way to wind down was to listen to horror stories.
That's interesting, because you also mentioned that a lot of other psychotherapists, the connection between horror media and psychotherapists is really interesting.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few of my psychotherapy friends and counselor friends, and they're horror fans. I'm sorry, I don't mean to go too off track. I just wanted to touch on this.
That's
such a weird little, such a weird little thing. I think for me, it had something to do with being pumped up with so much adrenaline. I worked in a few like suicide escalation lines. I had a lot of adrenaline. Sometimes 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. shifts, doing 2 different jobs. And at the end of the day, I'd still have all this adrenaline, and it took me a while to wind down. And I've always appreciated horror stories and like a horror narrative medium. So listening to those just kind of helped me, like, I don't know, like taper down from the adrenaline. So that's
Yeah.
the podcast that I listen to, and listen to a lot of things about horror movies and horror stories in podcast form. But Sasha is more of a podcast fan, so I guess he has a greater point of reference.
I listen to mainly 2 or 3 podcasts. Last Podcast on the Left is one of my favorites, which talks about like the darker side of humanity, serial killers, the unexplained weirdness and all that kind of stuff. But they have a panel with they're all comedians actually that talk about this, and they do a really interesting, they have a really great rapport with each other when they explore these things.
Who are the hosts? Who are the presenters? Who are the hosts on that?
Oh God, I'll have to look their names up. Henry Zabrowski is the comedian, Marcus Parks, and a third dude, I can't remember his name.
Okay, cool.
But I also listen to Forgotten Australia, which is a podcast that looks at forgotten Australian history, which is really, really interesting, and a few other ones, but those are pretty much the main 2 that I sort of flip between.
Interesting. So you both got a bit of a connection there with the darker side of, well, I mean, it's only considered the darker side because of society, right? I mean, every human being has light and shade. It's just about acknowledge it. And Gio, I just want to actually highlight the thing about the horror, because I love horror as well. It's one of my favorite genres. I'm not scared by it at all. I'm fascinated by it, because watching it, I'm like, human beings can be like this, but I know it's not real. So there's something about watching a horror, or watching or listening to stories about killers or people that have done really intense things, is it's exploring the darker side of humans and the possibilities of where humans can go, without actually going there ourselves, like it's just something we can actually explore, that side of humans, because it's there with everybody, it's just all at different varying degrees. So I just think that's really interesting, that you two you really like the horrors as well. A lot of my psychology friends love it.
Yeah, there you go. There's definitely something to it. And, you just echoed exactly what we talk about nearly every day, this idea that we need to embrace this darker side of ourselves. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, see mental health as a dark side. It doesn't have to be. Or to admit that you feel sad sometimes or angry sometimes, that is an unfavorable dark side. There's nothing wrong with embracing a little bit of darkness. And as you mentioned, we do have dark and light, and we do have the grey side of things as well. We need to embrace all the full colours and spectrums of our personalities and beings. And there's nothing wrong with a little bit of darkness.
Absolutely. Gia, would you mind if I briefly just shared something and then asked you a little bit of advice, which then could help the community?
Of course.
So last year, for the first time, I started medication, and for years I was just so judgmental about it, thinking that medication is going to be something that means there's something wrong with me. I'm a human that's failed. I'm a broken person, if I have to have medication. But it has absolutely changed my life around, and it's amazing when you actually are open to trying to embrace all aspects of what you're going through as a human being and what those triggers are. It's just incredible where you can go. So and also the importance of making sure that you keep on track with your psychologist or psychotherapist, whoever you're going to, your counselor, and if you are temporarily on medication, never try and wean off it. I tried to wean off it recently, and I had an absolutely terrible time, and I self-harmed again after 5 years. And this is the first time I'm publicly showing this. Years ago, I self-harmed a lot, but I was so ashamed I would hide it, and very little people knew. But now it's like, no, we shouldn't feel ashamed about these things. It's not, we shouldn't be seen as, I don't know, like there's something wrong with you because you're self-harming. There are reasons for the things that we all do as humans. And as long as you can try your best to know that other people are going through stuff and that you can reach out, that's really important to know. So how would you suggest people deal with coming to terms with shame, and what are some basic steps that people can do to reach out to the community for
Or
help?
professionals, yeah.
Yeah,
Shame
yeah, the professional.
one. Shame is a tricky one because shame feels like internal torture. It's not fair on us at all, and it's not fair on us to continuously engage in torture narrative. And I believe that we can fall into problem-saturated stories and to demonize ourselves when all we're doing is our best. And especially right now, a lot of people are doing the best that they can with the tools that they have, and sometimes with the resources they have. So when it comes to shame, I would say it's important to work alongside with it, not against it, because then that's giving us more shame. So work with our demons, work with our shame, reach out where possible, and it is possible for everyone to find the right care team for them. If a psychologist isn't right for you, they're just not right for you. Keep trying for another one. You will find someone that works well with you. And medication isn't for everyone, but it is for some. Everyone has a different brain chemistry. Not everyone's going to find medication to be their saving grace, but some people actually will, and some people do benefit from it. Everyone's brain is completely different. But I do hope that everyone tries to search for the right care team because they deserve that. They deserve the right psychologist for them. Maybe someone like that's fully maternal, maybe someone that's really strict. Different personalities work for everyone. I've seen a few psychologists myself, and some are just not the right fit. And so I move on to the next one.
After all, aren't they?
Sorry, what was that?
They're humans after all, aren't they? So I guess it's just a matter of finding the human that you connect with.
Yeah, well said. Perfect. No,
like
it's
that.
it's definitely a tough journey, but it's a journey that's worth seeking out, protecting our mental health and keeping it supported.
Just quickly, this idea of working with shame as opposed to working against it, um, what does that look like in somebody's head? You know, if you could kind of articulate that in some way.
I think sometimes when we're, for example, working in a therapeutic process, sometimes clients and people that engage with therapy can feel a little bit set back if they're not getting over guilt or shame, or they're not getting over a traumatic incident fast enough. So then they start to re-traumatize themselves and they get frustrated with themselves. Then they're not getting over something that they feel that they should be in what they perceive it is a timely manner. It's not fair. And it's a tough expectation that we put on ourselves. So the idea to work with shame is to understand that, yes, it's potentially here, it's there, and it's asking us to acknowledge it. Maybe not so much in a way that we need to attack it and remove it immediately, but a way that we need to work through it and process it.
So it's more of an indicator than a threat.
It's an indicator. It's our bodies telling us, I need you to look at me. The same way that when we get panic attacks, it's our bodies telling us, I'm actually very stressed and I'm trying to get your attention now. And I'm giving you physical symptoms to show you that I am present and I am here.
Mm.
Beautifully said. Yeah, yeah. Your body tells you. Your body knows. Listen to it.
I just want to quickly interject here. There's an interesting fact about the word demon, which we in the Western world, and particularly nowadays, we look at as like a negative connotation. The word demon actually comes from the Greek daemon, which back in the days of the Greeks, daemon was a person's positive inner spirit friend, essentially. So if we look at it through this kind of lens, the idea of working with our demons is looking at the issues that they present to us, and instead of working against them, make friends with them is for a positive light. The same way you were saying is about work with them. Yeah, make friends with your demons. They're not that scary.
That's amazing. Is that quite tied to the idea of integrating your shadow? Is this kind of like, or is this kind
Like
of like
Jungian sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I guess in a way, I think you may have taken it from that. Like I said, I know like the cliff notes of Jung, but I just know an interesting factoid is that demon doesn't actually mean, a
it's not an
devil or
evil spirit, or it's not like
It's
an
not,
evil
no,
possession.
that word has been co-opted throughout the years by the Judeo-Christian lens over the last sort of 2,000
Right.
years to positive connotation, positive, negative. I don't like this black and white ideology of things. But yeah, it's sort of been co-opted in terms of that. But what it actually means is an inner spirit that can guide you.
Right.
And
Wow.
if we look through the works of a lot of the medieval occultists and the way that they used demons, a lot of the demons aren't actually necessarily evil. They simply allowed you to experience different things or to change your consciousness to allow yourself to experience certain things. So bringing it back to what we were saying before about the healing power of shame and coming into this context of it, yeah, make friends with your inner demons, because they're probably, pointing you in the right direction.
Absolutely. I like the change of language that we have in the space as well, where we would ask questions like, how is your mental health? And now ideally we're shifting to changing the language to, what is your relationship like with your mental health? So it's this idea that we have a relationship with mental health. We have a relationship with things like grief, with shame, with trauma, a relationship to build on, which, as we know, all relationships can be shaky, but can also have healing properties.
And it's also important, the language that we use also dictates the lens through which we understand things.
That's right.
So by saying how is the
framing.
relationship, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Like saying what's the relationship with your mental health, it allows you to sort of look at it as like, how do I discuss with that concept, as opposed to the other way around. I think that's really, really interesting.
Powerful.
Beautiful.
Sorry, guys.
That's fine. If you need to hide anything, if there's like some wild drug deal going down on your end, you can close the camera.
Unfortunately.
Their blood satchels.
Yeah, blood satchels and more skulls on the way, I imagine.
That was beautifully said, and I absolutely resonate with what you're saying, Ju, and also Sasha, the whole concept of demon and the word, that's those two things that you've both said really tie beautifully together, because it's true, that thing is there within all of us, and knowing how to work with it, and knowing that it's just there trying to protect you. But if you just talk to it and say, hey, I'm going to work with you, and I know you're here to protect me, it's okay, I've got this, let's work together. I see you, I acknowledge you, I love you, I care for you, you are a part of me, but you don't control me.
Beautiful.
Bloody breakthroughs all
Which-
around. I feel healed already. Minti.
Namaste.
Which brings
Namaste indeed.
absolutely would love to know a little bit more about the artists and creatives and beautiful eclectic humans that you've had on your podcast, and when your next podcast is dropping and when we can check it out.
Oh, absolutely.
So episode 1 featured my dear friend Elizabeth Lish-Schgetz, who is a poet, fire twirler, musician, sculptress, filmmaker, etc. And it was an in-depth interview with her. That one's already out. That's episode 1. Episode 2, in terms of our interview series, is actually with, drum roll please, Dave. And we've got a few other people coming up. We have a composer, we have some filmmakers, the fine people behind Black Forest Films, which is a film production company that I work with. They'll be coming on to the podcast at some point to talk about their story. What else? Yeah, but we were also sort of going to be having these special episodes in between called Reflections, where we sort of look at and talk about like the themes and topics that are presented in the previous podcast. So you have the initial commentary or the initial content put out by the interview, and then it's sort of our response to that to create more of a conversation in terms of it. We'll send you some links as to where you can listen to the podcast, but at the moment everything has to be, due to contractual obligations, listened to through the Mooney Valley website. So we'll send that through to you as soon as possible.
Also on Spotify.
Wonderful.
Spotify
Yeah, also
as well.
Spotify. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Great.
So
In the
Minti, go for it. Did you have another thing?
You go.
I was going to say, like, I think it's very smart to use these other reflection episodes, so you two can like do the deep dive into those things yourselves, because within 40 or 50 minutes or an hour of a conversation, the balance between the interviewer and the guest, there's a lot of accommodating for not diving into all of the things. There's there's a bit of a, there's a restrictive element to it. So
Hmm.
Mm.
you might end up finding that the some of the reflection episodes might be for you guys more potentially pivotal than speaking with some guests.
Hmm.
Absolutely. However, we do find a lot of benefit to hearing the voices of the artists. For example, we had in our own reflections right now with Lish, the incredible sculptorist, poet, all-round artist.
Mhm.
She talked about, I guess, the birth of her creativity, talked about her trauma, and that was something that we could never really comment on. We needed to hear this incredible story, and it's beautifully engaging for us, and it's still a learning process. Being able to share our platform with this amazing voice and hearing about her own perspective of trauma. And we can only comment it from our point of view and from possible research, from readings, from the philosophical side of trauma, the psychotherapeutic side of trauma, but her trauma will always be different and interpreted in a completely different way. So I think it's a good combination to have our commentary, but also these phenomenal voices of these Melbourne artists as well.
Do you feel like you're spoilt for choice here in Melbourne with people to talk to?
Well, we didn't really know how many people would be interested, and we cast a net. We put up a little SurveyMonkey survey a while back, and we had quite a few people that were keen to be guests. And to our surprise and amazement, people wanted to engage more with the candle. So yeah, we're still completely surprised. And if anyone's listening or watching and are interested in sharing their story and with the rest of Melbourne and talking about mental health and artistry, hit us up.
Yeah.
Luke O'Brien, just going to do a shout out to Luke O'Brien. He's really big on mental health. He's an absolute gem of a human. I would recommend, Luke, if you're interested in talking to these beautiful humans, that you reach out and you get on board with the candle, man.
That would be
thank
really
you.
great. Yeah, he's one of these guys who, super creative, but obviously has a lot of darkness to deal with, but has found himself in a position of embracing vulnerability for the sake of himself and others, and puts himself on the line for other people. And yeah, he's gone to Talking Blue a few times, and he engages with this freestyle, introspective, open, just flowing kind of raps, I guess, raps or poetry. And it's really quite lovely to witness. So
Beautiful.
people,
And people too, he'll just check in with you. If you need help, he will be present, and he will consistently be present until he knows the person is okay. And he's so open about talking about mental health and about all sorts of trauma and his experience, and normalizing it and taking away the shame from it. I think he would be a really great person for you guys to chat to.
Amazing.
So for people to find the kind of the epicenter of your stuff and your content, do you guys have a website or anything that people should jump on?
We do, thecandlemelb.com. We've also got our Facebook, which is also called The Candle Melb. Our Instagram, which is Melbourne Mental Health. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'll send you those details for our Instagram page, but you can also find it by typing in The Candle. And we cannot wait to launch our incredible interview with yourself, Dave, which was wonderful. We've been listening to it again. And it's an incredible story for the listeners as well. And we recommend for people to please have a listen, because you did share some amazing insights.
I appreciate it. Well, you can't share an insight unless people give you an opportunity. So, the opportunity was there, and it was natural for me to connect with you guys. And I had not only a good time, but a thoroughly enjoyable, like a meaningful time. Like we got to some things.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. All right. So, Zoom only allows us to have so much time. We'd probably love to talk with you, connect with you guys again in the future. But Gia and Sasha, thanks again for joining us. Are there any, departing words or final words you'd like to give to the people as an offering, perhaps?
Well, firstly, thank you so much to you both. You've been such wonderful interviewers and incredible hosts. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about the candle and your platform. We really appreciate it. And to any listeners listening, please engage with your mental health, take priority of it. You are deserving of it. And if you are needing help, please know that you deserve to have access to it.
And don't eat yellow snow.
Well
Don't do
said.
it, guys.
Unless it's in a cup.
Unless it's in a cup, unless you sort
Yeah.
of use and sprinkle the flavor on there themselves.
That makes it all that makes all the difference.
Brilliant. Minty, please sign us off.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I just want to close and just once again thank our First Nations people for having the opportunity to be here. We are on stolen land, and with all of you here and all of our listeners and people watching, I would like to pay the respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And may we always keep their story in our hearts and know that we are of one heart, one mind, and one soul. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in today.